Welcome back to basics. So this is episode 14. Today we are going to be doing something again a little bit different. After this is the week of different things, we're going to be building some shuttles. I'm going to start out with some very simple sort of SSTOs and hopefully move up to something that can actually deliver some payload to orbit. But I've never ever done this before, so this is going to be something different. So you find me in the VAB, and I'm just putting the finishing touches together on my first ever SSTO. I've got two Rapier engines at the back there, a nuclear engine. I'm trying to put the staging on them just so that I can actually turn them on off. And I've attached some parachutes because I know that I'm probably going to have trouble landing this thing. We clip the nuclear engine a little bit at the body, we move things around. What I'm trying to do is make sure that that center of lift is behind the center of mass with and without fuel in the tanks. And that is actually a little bit of a challenge for me because of it being an SSTO. So, first launch, going well. Take off the runway, lovely. You can see I'm using the Rapier engines there in sort of air breathing mode. I put the Rapier details to one side because I want to measure their actual their thrust. What I want to be aware of is when they start to lose thrust. Now, one of the issues that you see I overheat a bit is coming up as well because we're going very hot, and this craft is very, very twitchy. It's a very twitchy craft. You see the engine start to die now, and I'm monitoring my Apple apps. I'm looking at what the engine's doing. I switch over to the nuclear engine now. I could have put fuel on so I could use the Raptor, the Rapier engines, is it? Yeah, the Rapier engines to take me all the way up to orbit. Supposedly, if you build an SSTO, just having Rapier engines is normally a great idea. This craft does not have any payload in it. It's got no cargo bay. This is just a proof of concept for me, and of course I've got Jebediah flying it because this is a completely test pilot situation, and Jeb's the only man for the job on this one. Or more accurately, he's the only man crazy enough to do it. So we get into orbit, and then I do a little deorbit burn there just to bring my periaps down into the atmosphere, just dipping it down. I don't want to come down too fast. We don't want a sort of ballistic arc type structure situation. So I brought it down. I'm coming over the desert, and my aim is to try and land near the KSP because I've never actually done something like this before. The craft is in the high altitude is actually reasonably stable, and it's what you'd expect. The air's pretty thin, it's slowing us down, but we're aerodynamically stable. It's very nice, and I'm feeling quite positive at the moment. There's a bit of heating building up. That could be down to the choice of parts I've got. It could be down to the angle of attack I've gone for. By putting the nose down there, I'm actually pushing myself down into the atmosphere a bit more. If I lift up, I'll sort of skim the atmosphere a bit less. So you can actually do that to control. You see there, I'm trying to lift. I've realised the mountains are coming up, and I just try and just lift the nose up a bit, and then realise actually I'm actually definitely going to fly over. So I put the nose back down, try and bring myself down towards KSP. Yeah, what I could be doing here is some S-turns if I started turning to the left and the right, but I do not know how stable this craft is, and it is starting to overheat. We're at 20 kilometers, and yeah, that's it. We hit a spin moment. The whole craft just flipped out of control there, and lost a huge amount of speed instantly. Now, in real world, Jeb would have been basically smashed inside his cockpit there, probably would have blacked out. Luckily for the Kerbal world, he was able to keep his head going for a little bit there, and we're coming down. It's the front of the craft is still hot. That's how much heat it's actually built up, because we're not actually going that fast now. We lost a lot of speed very quickly. The velocity loss on that flat spin moment was huge. So we fire up the Rapier engines again. We can actually we can fly through the air now with a reasonable amount of fuel still on board for them. We probably over-fueled them with liquid fuel, in fact. So this craft is pure liquid fuel. In my head, we could have actually probably done better. We could have done a lot better with this craft. So we put the nuclear engine on because it's more responsive at this point. I just wanted a little bit of forward thrust. We turn that off. We're coming in for a landing on the runway. Yep, Jeb's just gonna. We're drifting off. Jeb, we're drifting off to one side. What's going? No. Pull it back. Pull it back. Yeah, we're fine. Look at that. What a landing. What a brilliant side skid landing. Brilliant. No. Oh. Jeb. Well, we have the one engine and bits of the craft. Probably should have. So anyway, I modified the craft and had another go, and you'll actually see I put some radiators on. I was still learning a little bit about the thermal control, and I wondered whether radiators would actually allow us to stop the heating that we're getting. So we put a bit of radiator on there. We fire the engines up. We go up as fast as we can. And my aim here is, I don't actually care about if I get into orbit with this craft. I just want to see if the radiators bleed off some of the heat that we were building up. So you see we're going through the heating phase in the upper atmosphere there, and we're not getting the same heat buildup. So I don't know if they do or not. There was no sign of heat buildup at that point, which was very good. Now we're coming down, and flat spin again, and the craft just goes crazy, and it starts to have a parachute, because this is not as nimble as the first version with those radiators stuck on the top. So we've lost the nose. Jeb, go on. So that was our little test craft to try and understand a little bit what we do. I probably should have perfected it, but I didn't. So the next thing we're going to try and do is we're going to try and send some sort of, or put a craft together that can actually take something into orbit, a payload, be it a small satellite or something like that. So we put a little cargo bay there, and this is using, I think, the Mark II parts. And so we're going to use 2 of the Rapier engines and a nuclear engine, just like on the last craft, but this is a lot bigger, this one. Bigger wings, bigger fuel tanks. We've got a lot more material to work with here. This is I'm thinking, okay, we'll build an SSTO, we'll go into orbit. Yeah, brilliant. I'll be able to drop some satellites off, because at the moment we don't really have much satellite network around Kerbin. Not that we need it, but we've been traveling into planetary recently, and I realised that we've actually now got a better communication system around Joule than we do around Kerbin, which is pretty embarrassing, actually. I start going, okay, we need to put air intakes on this, and I quite like these sort of these ram scoops that go on the side, although they're a bit annoying to actually mount on the actual craft and get them right. So we move them around a bit, we put them on the body, we're putting them on the wing, and I think the wing actually for me worked best. It would be interesting to know about occlusion and stuff for things like that. So we're going to try taking off. I did it, yeah, here we go. And so this is the new craft, and it takes off reasonably well from the runway. Uses sort of standard engine power that we were using before. We slow the engines down a bit, because I don't want to. I'm aware that we overheated in the lower atmosphere previously, so I'm more aware now of, right, let's get up to, just let it drift up into that sort of thinner air, and then start cranking the power up a bit, just because I don't want to carry excess heat up if I don't have to. I don't know if that's important or not, but my aim actually when doing this was to try and get up reasonably high, and then basically run the engines as hard as possible, get it as hot as possible up high, and then flip it up into sort of a suborbital arc where hopefully the nuclear engine could actually kick in. And then if worst comes to worst, you can detach your payload, and hopefully it can actually orbit itself, and the rest of your craft will come down later on. I don't think this worked. I'm not entirely convinced this is the right sort of craft for me. I'm very much a rocket fan, and planes is definitely something I need to work on. It's something I have the Poor Pilot Better Planes series, and that's actually helped me develop a lot more sort of understanding of the controls of planes and a little bit like that. Arguably, this would actually probably be easier if I had Ferrum for it, because the atmosphere acts differently, but then I don't know. So it's an interesting one. So we get into that sort of suborbital arc, we fire the nuclear engine, and we're burning away through our fuel, but we're not really going to get up there. And it's that point that I decide, right, well, let's do a re-entry test, because obviously let's test this craft's shape on re-entry more than anything else. I'm actually at this point thinking, do I need to put boosters on it at the start just to get, or something to give it a kick? The nuclear engine's very nice, but it is not a lot of energy in one bite. So once you're in orbit, brilliant to have it. And I definitely recommend carrying one if you build an SSTO, because you get a lot for your bang for your buck, but it's not great for coming through, atmosphere. So we actually re-enter reasonably easily into the atmosphere, and to the point where we actually slowed down a lot quicker than I was expecting. And we actually ended up in a bit of a death dive at one point. But the craft has decent sized wings. We can pull out of it. We have no real fuel at this point, I don't believe. I think we've used all the fuel up with our engine. So this is a gliding, I won't say dead stick, but it's a gliding return. We used every single piece of fuel and oxidizer to get up to that height. So that means if we want to go higher, we're going to have to redesign this craft. But we can at least, test its landing. Jeb's had some interesting landings so far, and of course he's flying this craft again because he's our test pilot. And so we're coming down, and a little bit of flaring just before we down, and there we go, perfect landing. So if nothing else, this craft actually showed, we can land one of these things. It has quite tall landing gear, and I think I'd probably agree with doing that in the future, Jeb. So yeah. So I decided to take an alternative track with the development at this point, and we decided to look at actual, do I just want a shuttle? So I put together quickly a shuttle that looks a bit like the American one. Small engines. These are definitely not the shuttle main engines that you would find on the original shuttle design in the American NASA shuttle design. This was basically me just testing stability on the runway. I did quite a lot of testing for this, because I'm aware that shuttles can go horribly wrong. So you can actually see now in the actual VAB, this is the shuttle. It's slightly longer than the sort of the standard shuttle. It's got a larger cargo bay because I have a desire to send up some quite large components. This is partly why we're doing the shuttle development program, and partly because I don't really get shuttles. So for this one, we basically took our original model, which is using those small sort of high efficiency engines in the middle there, and we've strapped some rocket engines on. Just managed to get up there. Really loud rocket engines, I must say. And just seeing how it flies, because from our little tests, I think the one thing that got me was the twitchiness, the instability we're getting, particularly with fuel flow changes and things like that. So I basically was just running a few little tests to see, well, what works, what doesn't work. And this is, it's an interesting little process you can go through learning. And I would advise it, some little test runs. So this is our test run. We've taken off with these jet engines. We're going to come in for a landing. Yeah, he landed okay, but yeah. So some changes. We added in some air brakes. The actual video cut out previously, I must say that the recording was not great. So we put some air brakes on, and we start off. This is pretty much the same craft from before. We're going to try and do the same thing with our air brakes this time, because stopping the original one took a while, shall we say. Part of the reason I think the clip cut out was because it was a while to stop. So this one comes up, and it's the same craft basically, but with our air brakes, and we're just repeating the test experiments. I don't want to show you every single landing, but some of them are important. So we go out far, we build up a bit of speed. This craft has become twitchy, and I noticed this at this point, and I'm starting to worry a little bit about the level of twitch, shall we say. So I try a bit with and without engines on. We're trying to check glide slopes and maneuverability without engine power, because ideally you don't want to. We go, and we end it. Now, interestingly, I didn't really use the air brakes for this one, for the actual coming in for landing. It stopped reasonably well, okay. So we shut the engines down, and there we go. So that's I think our second iteration of this shuttle. And Jeb gets out and has a look around, and very happy with himself. You notice he's still got the glitch of flowing across the ground, and he gets some stuff, and we get back to work. So the next iteration, we actually moved those jet engines into the sort of body of the craft, and we've replaced our 3 main thrusters for orbital work with a nuclear engine. Yeah, we put a nuclear engine in because, well, it just gives me more delta V for what I need. It also means I don't have to carry any oxidizer, and that is a bonus for me on this one, because carrying that extra oxidizer is extra mass, and it also means I can play around a little bit more with the balance of the craft. So we take off with our 3 main engines. You can see we've now got, because of the lock, we've lost the side pods. We've actually brought them into the main body of the craft. We've now got our ram air scripts on the outside. We've gone much higher here, much faster. We're just playing around. This craft has gained a little bit of stability by doing this. I'm not entirely sure why. Possibly because our thrust is now more towards the center line of the craft because of that top engine. It's still not perfect though. It still requires a little bit of finessing at times. So we're going to come in for another landing. It takes a while. I will say all of this work took an age to actually do, and this is all sped up at sort of, between 3 and 9 times its normal speed. So if it twitches, it's actually a little bit slower than real life. Again, landing gear down, always remember to put them down because it's a nightmare if you don't. I came in a bit too shallow, which allowed me to actually test this, and I actually skimmed the ground there. Little burst of the engines pulled us out of it, and then we do a landing, put the air brakes on, slow down, and I'm actually quite happy with this craft now because we've gone through some iterations of it and developed what I think is a pretty nice vehicle actually. It's longer than the NASA shuttle. It's got air-breathing engines. It's got a nuclear engine, so it's quite a different craft. It doesn't have a main sort of set of engines on the back for launch. So what we've done is we've attached it to what I like to think of as a bit of a sort of hybrid Buran shuttle combo. So we've got a selection of engines on the back of the big orange fuel tank there, and they're to one side, and that's to sort of counterbalance the structure of the ship. And we've also got our favourite solid rocket boosters on the side there, and they're actually angled away, so that they're actually angled towards the orbiter slightly to just give us a little bit more stability on launch. It gets up very quickly, and they pull away very nicely. And then you can see we are fighting a little bit. I'm still trying to, and honestly, it rolls a lot. This was our first launch with a test payload, and it was when we got up to this sort of we got a little bit of atmosphere that's just causing a little drag. You can see I am fighting with the controls now to keep it on level. I wasn't happy with this launch, and I did go back actually, and future launches have modified that quite considerably. So the orbiter is spinning around head over heels in orbit. We activate our nuclear engine, and we're just going to position ourselves now for orbital insertion, and we just fire the nuclear engine. Now, one thing to be aware of, the payload in this is a large tank of fuel, but it is disabled, so I cannot use it, so it's basically a dead weight in there. It's probably potentially the largest, heaviest cargo this craft would ever have to carry, so hopefully if it can get this into orbit, it can get anything into orbit. It took a long time on the nuclear engine, and what you'll actually find is we start to dip back down into the atmosphere, and so we burn upwards. We have enough velocity in the orbit, enough energy in the orbit to actually be okay. It's just a matter of the eccentricity of the orbit, which is the problem. So by burning down, and there we go, we're just going to release the cargo. What I should have actually done, although we're in the atmosphere right now, we could have done some burning to pull ourselves out. It wouldn't have been impossible, so I'm aware of that. So I consider it's a semi-success. We could have pulled ourselves out of this, but we decide, you know what, we can use it as a re-entry test. We're pretty much up to orbital speed. It was slightly below, but it's, you know, we'll do a re-entry test. We're nowhere near the KSC because we've done that sort of half orbit situation thing going on. And just as we see, I think this is a lovely image. Just as we come over here over the ocean, we're coming into the atmosphere, and we've got the sun coming up, I think, or Kerbal coming up. It's beautiful. Just as we start to get some overheating, actually looks like the sun is burning us. So we start to go into the atmosphere, and we're at what, 38 kilometers up now. This craft is reasonably stable. You see, I've got it angled pointing upwards because I'm trying to slow its descent a little bit. And then I let it, once we get down a little bit, I let it face more into the airstream. And this will, you know, I'll play around with this just to try and keep it reasonably high up while we're losing some of the heat, the energy. We interestingly do have those little canards at the front, and they do really well at not overheating because this craft, it's got a lot behind it. There's a lot of energy that needs to be dissipated. You can see, if you actually look, we're getting overheating marks. We're getting like sort of re-entry marks actually on the wheel wells and things like that, and that worries me a little bit. Now, the stability goes a little bit special, but I think that's more to do with the advanced SAS than anything else. It actually flies better manually when coming through the atmosphere. When it does this sort of belly flop here like this, it loses a lot of speed rapidly. And this was a problem. Mainly, we've actually, you can see now we're diving down. All of our energy is gone from forward because we started to spin. And so we've actually got to partake a little bit more energy. If we didn't have these engines, I'd be looking to point the nose right down at the ground and hopefully pull out of the dive. Because we've got these engines, we can actually put a bit of energy into the flight, as it were, and just sort of bring ourselves out. So it gives us not only does it give us more cross-range capability, which the space shuttle was famed for needing when they were designing it, but it also means we can, in a situation like that, not nosedive into the ground. I start to look around and think, right, where can I land? What can I do? Is there anywhere nice to do these things? And I don't really want to fly all the way around Kerbin. It's not something that I really enjoy in a plane. I mean, if I had a task that was that. So what I actually do is I spend my time while we're descending just playing around with the craft, just seeing what it does, you know, its stability. We do a little bit of a bank left and right. I pull up a little bit, I let the nose drop a little bit, just to see the sort of the impact when it's going at high speeds like this, because it is reasonably high speed now. It's a return, it's now empty of cargo, so we're actually seeing it, you know, flying through the atmosphere. I think it would be a staggeringly different craft if you still had that payload on board. I think if you were having to abort, I'd be definitely looking at bailing the payload out at some point. But in general, it's actually a very nice little craft. However, I am not going to fly this all the way back to the KSC. So I decide, you know what, one of the things we do need to trial is water landing. So we shut the engines down and we're just going to coast. And this is a difficult one. I mean, it's not as bad as it used to be. KSP or Kerbal has improved a lot with the water physics, because it used to be you touched the water, you died. It was, you know, you avoided water, unlike the real world. But let's see what happens. So we're coming in, we're quite fast, and yeah, we lost the nose. We lost the very tip of the nose and a couple of the engines at the back. You can see they're actually firing randomly behind us, but the craft's down. So yeah, until next time.